Taylor Eichste. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. I'm hanging in there. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right, man. I was saying pre-roll, uh, as you were counseling, you were counseling me how to make sure I pronounce your name correctly. Can you go through that? I think that's that's important.
Sure. Yeah, it's Ikesty, and the easiest way to remember that is if you have a friend named Ike and he has some tea, then it would be technically Ike's tea, which is a very dumb way to go about remembering it, but it sometimes works. Usually, if I'm um, uh, on a plane sitting in first class where they come around and they take your order and all that, they come around and it's usually just like Mr. Shit. Like it's it's six letters, but for whatever reason, it ends up being an issue. I wish it was Jones or that sort of a thing. There was a football player that I believe he was on the Seahawks years ago. He was a fullback named Mac Strong, and I always have wanted that name badly. And I might change it one of these. Maybe in 10 years I'll just get really extra sick of stuff and change my name.
You can change it to a symbol like Prince, right?
Yeah, I'm down with that. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. If you run into some issues with your record company, and you want to, you know, find another creative way
Yeah,
to
I've been
keep
angry at my
to keep
parents for
money.
years for bringing me into this world with that last name. So it is what it is.
well, well, my name, everyone seems to know how to pronounce it, but they don't know how to spell it.
Right, you
So
have
my
one of those names that could be spelled in a number of different ways. But once you do spell it any of those ways, you got to be real dumb to mispronounce that.
right. You're gonna
But
get it right if you could if
Dr.
it's
Thunder works. In fact, I it's no offense to you, but my girlfriend didn't had not heard of you, and I was just on the phone with her a few minutes ago and stuff, and I'm like, I gotta go, I gotta talk to Dr. Thunder, and she was like, what the hell are you talking about? So out of context, it's got that's quite a name too.
well, so I actually have a doctorate, um under like unlike Dr. Dre or something.
Well, yeah, no, but that's great.
So I actually have a doctorate, and my nickname Thunder is, I mean, my dad gave me that nickname when I was a kid, and it has nothing to do with music. Um, just it just has something to do with running through a hollowed floor house, when I was 5 and 6, and the thunderous sound that made.
Nice.
So it's always those kind of things that stick, and so I went with it. And these days you have to try to find ways to uh, make people remember. You know, I mean, there's a lot of great players. There's a lot of great composers. There's a lot of great educators. There's a lot of material. There's a lot of books. There's a lot. I mean, there's just a lot of everything.
Right.
And uh, what are some things that you do to try to create that sort of separation? I mean, you're a recording artist. You're composer and arranger. I mean, what are things that you're doing, and or is that something that you think about at all?
Yeah, I mean, I've had a really fortunate career in life where I've had just a lot of different opportunities. I've had a lot of variety in my life, which is great. So playing with a lot of musicians that I really love to play with, playing music and writing music that I love to do. So I've been really fortunate to just kind of be able to have a career where I'm just focused on that. And up until this last crazy year was just kind of traveling 80-90% of the time, and going from show to show and things like that. And I really um, loved that, and kind of all my attention was wrapped up in trying to manage that and kind of juggle life things themselves and all that. And so as far as thinking about my own, image or certain things that would be something to separate myself, I guess I've just kind of tried the best I can to throw my energy just into, the work itself and let a lot of that sorted out. I am releasing a new album early next year. It was supposed to be this last year, but the world and everything. But now I'm kind of back in the boat of having to think about a lot of those things. The last album of mine that I released as a band leader was it's coming up on 11 years ago. And so for me, I kind of went through this stretch of life where I was traveling with a lot of other bands and musicians that I loved dearly and really enjoyed playing, but also just kind of trying to navigate life itself and being on the road all the time and all these other different things. And I was writing a lot of music for symphony orchestra and had kind of bigger projects that I'd be working on and things like that. And after releasing 7 albums as a leader, I was just kind of also a little burnt out on the process of that, because you need the time and motivation and creative energy and all of that kind of stuff to coincide. Sometimes you get great ideas musically, but no time to really put them together into something, or a number of combinations therein. But I'm finally, and I'm excited about it, but I'm finally going to be releasing my 8th album officially in May, but they're going to start releasing singles in January. But I'm excited to have to think about those kind of things again, and think about being a band leader and presenting my own music to the world, as opposed to being a part of presenting someone else's music. It's a chance to get a little bit more personal and share more of who I am as a musician. So I'm excited to get, to have to think about all those different things and, doing like things like that I notoriously hate, like photo shoots or things like that, I always used to, when I was signed to Concord Records years ago, I did 3 albums for them, and they were called Lucky to Be Me, Let It Come to You, and Daylight at Midnight. And back in those days, I kind of had an up close view of everything you have to deal with just all of those elements and those kind of things. And, being on a group email where people are trying to Photoshop your face and having a discussion on a group email chain about like what quadrant of a beard to Photoshop out, or like, different things, like all of those kind of stuff that has nothing to do with the music, but it's like, it's an inevitable part of, if you're doing your own thing, being a band leader, and especially if you're a part of kind of a team or a record label or different people like that, because they're third person, they're looking at you and all that. And so the stuff I'm not necessarily always focused on or thinking about, I have to acknowledge that, they're looking at that kind of stuff. And so it's an adjustment, it's an adjustment in a way where if what I had to worry about before was, finishing a particular composition in time for a show and making sure I'm packed enough for these 2 tours that I'm, about to get on an airplane for, and all those kind of things. And then kind of going from that to, okay, putting together a big new project and my own music to now then having to focus on those things that are outside of the music itself. And it's really interesting too, because the last album I released was 11 years ago, and in 11 years, God, the entire music industry, let alone the world and pandemic and, all this kind of stuff. Yeah. But the music industry itself has really changed, and the way people release music and digest it has greatly changed in 11 years. So, I'm excited to kind of be a part of that process. And I'm hoping that, if this is probably the longest answer possible of what distinguishes you or separates you from other people, I'm hoping that the music and the musical statement that I have to say is something that's unique or its own thing, and something that people would.
Thank you so much for watching my video so far. If you'd like to support, there are several ways to do so below. Also, likes are free. Please comment, share, and subscribe. Now back to the video.
Something that people would enjoy, and hopefully that could serve to stand up. I could always care less about the other stuff. When I was first signed to Concord, this album I did, Lucky to Be Me, they had a photo shoot that they set up on a beach, and I was they brought a 9-foot Yamaha grand piano out onto a beach. And actually, I'm a Yamaha artist, but in all of the years of ever requesting pianos at certain venues, the best piano that they ever sent to this day was that piano that they sent to the beach for the photo shoot. But then they had a semi truck like filled with clothes that you're supposed to keep the tag on and all that kind of stuff. They had interns that were throwing bread for seagulls to gather around me, and they were trying to create an image that like I go to the beach every day and brood and sit around and sit on a rock and just hang out with the seagulls and all of those kind of stuff. So those kind of extra elements, I'm like, well, hey, at least they allowed me to record the music that I wanted to record. So that's the only thing that I really cared about.
So is there an artist that you have sort of maybe emulated or modeled your career after? I'm not talking stylistically. I'm talking, okay, this artist is doing these kinds of things. I like those kinds of things. I think I want to do, more of that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, and that has changed over time a lot. I think one thing I tell my students too that is a healthy thing is to be able to allow yourself to go through phases. So I've had a lot of different phases of emulating certain aspects of different people and the way that that they've gone about their career or kind of what their focus has been. And been, that's been a big part of inspiring me to kind of go towards those different directions. And I've had a number of really great role models throughout time too that have been good imprints to kind of follow their path and their direction in a lot of different aspects. So when I was a kid, I started playing piano when I was 4 years old. And my sister died when I was 3. She was 17 years old, and she was a young pianist and all of that herself. She kind of wanted to have a career in music. She got the chance to sit in a few times with the Doobie Brothers. And when I was a 3-year-old, I had a lot of experiences of like watching my sister get to do those things. And I grew up in a family where a lot of good music was playing and all the time, and I was exposed to a lot of great music. So I kind of I knew at a really early age that seemed really fun. So I wanted to try doing that, and I started playing piano when I was 4. And my earliest influences, if you can call them that when you're 4 or 5, were people that came from more the smooth jazz world, actually, out of everything. When I was about 4 or 5, I there was a group called Fat Burger. And there was one song that they had that my dad would play on a record, and I would refuse to go to sleep unless I heard that tune. And so them and the Rippingtons, and then I kind of developed this real obsession with David Benoit when I was about 6 or 7 years old. He was I went to go see him live, and I just thought he was having so much fun. And it was like music that had like a really fun beat to it. And it was exciting. It was exciting to listen to. And when I was 7, I met him after a concert, and he was dressed in a denim shirt and jeans. And that year I went to school for Halloween. I was David Benoit, and no one in my class knew what the hell I was. I'm like, well, this is what he wore on that concert. Like, I was a weird little kid. But when I was 8 years old, I had the opportunity to open for him. And also I learned when you're opening for someone, don't play all of their tunes as the opening set. So, but he actually was someone that then he really was immensely supportive, uh, and took an interest in, in me and my career, and this weird little kid that learned all of his tunes, and all of that. So he was a huge initial influence, and I'd say probably the biggest for me out of anyone, early on. And throughout the years, we became good friends, and sat in with each other in a lot of different contexts. But I would also watch him do shows where he would play with a symphony orchestra behind him, playing his music. And I saw that, and I knew that I wanted to do that kind of a thing too. And then there was people that, as the phases kind of continued, people like Benny Green and Mulgrew Miller, and then watching just all of the different things that someone like Herbie Hancock does. And when I was about 12, had the opportunity to sit in with Dave Brubeck. And Dave was someone that, and it was his 100th birthday, actually, a couple days ago. He would have been 100. But Dave was someone, too, that was a massive influence on me, because he was this old famous jazz legend that was nice to everyone. And so I was really inspired by the fact that you could have a long career in music and all of that, and you could be nice to everyone. You could be someone that's a really nice person. And actually, he still, throughout my whole life, inspired me greatly. Another big lesson I learned from Dave Brubeck was, the last time I saw him it was a few months before he passed away, and I went out to his house to have dinner with him and his wife, and he was too frail at that point to go out to perform and do gigs. But he had a small, like a Casio keyboard sitting there at the dinner table working out ideas. And one of the biggest things I learned from him is that you can, if you're a musician, you don't have to retire, and that you're in this for the love of it. And and so different people along the way have kind of provided those different inspirations for me that I have tried to kind of emulate in different aspects. There's a number of people on a musical level that were just maybe texturally or technique wise or different things like that I've been really inspired by, that I've wanted to be more play more like that. And then I hear someone else after a while, and then I'm like, okay, now I'm only going to listen to them for the next month and a half, or then I'm only going to listen to them for a month and a half. So it's for me, the model or imprint or emulations, all of that, they kind of have kept changing over time, and I try to absorb as much as I can from things that I found to be really beneficial to me as a musician or person, and I've tried to absorb that, but then kind of assimilate it all into the direction that I want to go, and all of that. And so I've tried to maintain kind of a mentality that I continue to keep learning and keep absorbing whatever I can from different people. I've absorbed a lot of practicing techniques from admiring great football coaches. In my other life, like if I wasn't a musician, I would have been clawing my way up the ranks to be a professional football coach. That was the only other real love in my life is playing and coaching football. But given
yeah. See, I knew I liked you. I knew I liked you right off, man.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you cut me open, it's 49ers. That's my personal team. Growing up in the Bay Area, I mean, it just like, that was my dad's team. It was that team. I've never, I could tell you any score of any 49ers game in the last 30 years. And my friends like to sometimes test this out. It's my dumb party trick, but it's like with pretty good accuracy, that kind of a thing. I nerd out about the 49ers, but also learning a lot from great coaches like Bill Walsh and the way that he kind of turned that whole operation, got it going again, and different things that he did, I like to use as metaphors when I'm teaching and things like that. So the game that the 49ers played the other day against the Buffalo Bills, it really actually, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine about this that I've known since I was like 1 year old. And he knows me very, very well. And he knows that like that game pissed me off more than any other game. Cause I knew that had I, when I was 12 years old, just like stopped playing music and just gone into the, when I was in high school, I coached the 7th grade and 8th grade football teams. And I got really into it, and I wanted to keep doing it, but it was like, well, I'm already, I've had some really exciting opportunities being a musician, and I love doing it. So I saw no reason to stop playing music. And, because if you want to be in, a coach in the NFL, like an assistant quality control offensive coach at first, or
it's
whatever.
like 90, it's like 90 hours a week, 90 to 100 hours a week.
It's endless. And so there's not really any time to split that up and all that kind of stuff. But that game really made me think like, damn, if I had gone that route, like, I feel like I could have turned that game around.
No shame losing against that team. They just beat
Steelers.
The Steelers, yeah.
Yeah. They're strong.
That team. I mean, I think that team can play with any team in the league. Yeah, and it's been a long time since the Bills have had a good team.
They have that like aroma of they're at least going to be in the AFC Championship. I think. I mean, I think Josh Allen is for real, and I think that just the rest of the team, they're so well coached, and they're genuinely. I mean, it's different than Bills teams of the past that kind of have had some success mid-season, and you're like, oh wow, the Bills, or they sneak into the playoffs and lose in the first round. I think they're a much stronger team than that. I think they exposed the Steelers a little bit too, but I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, good for Buffalo too. Like I have one friend that I can think of that's a Buffalo fan, but good for him. Good for that team. They've been waiting a long time.
Yeah, I have a couple students so I teach at Ohio State, and I had a couple students from New York, from Buffalo, that came and studied with me, and 3 of them actually. There's actually 3 of them, and they're all, of course, Bills fans. One in particular. Okay, so let me ask you. So the 49ers. Let me ask you, Kaepernick or Smith? So this is all
right now, because it's actually an interesting question to throw it out to either time.
Right. So I always thought that Smith would have been better for the 49ers long term. And although Kaepernick had a bigger arm, Smith, I think, was maybe the better long ball choice, as far as longevity. And I think he's shown that.
Yeah. I mean, I think, being a lifelong 49er fan, I went through years of wearing shirts with Alex Smith and his name crossed out, like things of just, he caused us so much pain because we stuck by him in these 4-12 years, and Mike Singletary benching him and yelling him at him on Sunday Night Football in front of the world, and really he gave us a lot of low moments, and I never thought that Harbaugh would hang on to him, and then he did, and we went to the NFC Championship. But when we went to the NFC Championship, he didn't throw a single pass to a wide receiver. So during that second year of Harbaugh, Alex went out during it was a tie game, what ended up being a tie game against the Rams, and Kaepernick came in, and he didn't start until his first start was the next game against the Bears, and he did great. And so then, but the game before it, Alex Smith, we had played, it was in Arizona, we had played the Cardinals, and he was like, he was something like 22 for 23, like just crazy accurate. Like it seemed like he had that year he did have kind of the pace and the rhythm of that team, and I feel like we would have gone to, we went to the Super Bowl with Kaepernick, but we probably would have gone either way with Alex. But, they had to ride with the hot hand. And at that point, we had a quarterback that had a different dimension then. And Cap offered something that Alex certainly didn't. And he was people want to talk about how great Kaepernick was as a runner, but he was genuinely, at that time too, with the particular set of play calling that they were giving for him and stuff, he was like a really, really accurate passer. And he could sit back in the pocket and he would find corners of the field that Alex Smith wouldn't find, because Alex Smith became kind of captain check down in a lot of ways. You wouldn't see a 4-5 touchdown game where he's slinging it. You're going to see dinking and dunking and all of that kind of stuff. And Kaepernick, in his very last year as a 49er, when Chip Kelly was coach, I believe, in the last or it might have been Tom Sula. I can't remember exactly who was the last, but Kaepernick was having a statistically great year. I mean, we were doing terrible, but the last time Kaepernick has seen a football field, he was actually, statistically, you could put that up with like half a season of Mahomes and some things like that. Like, he was doing really, really great things. I'm sure he could still play now. I mean, because the other question being, Smith versus Cap now, I think I would go Cap just right now. I mean, seeing what I saw from Alex Smith this last game against the Niners, actually, we were playing the Washington football team, and Alex was, dinking and dunking again, throwing balls straight into the ground, bounce passing people. And I respect his amazing comeback from that injury, but at the same time,
right.
It's, I feel like Cap's athleticism, you could throw Cap into a situation right now that someone like Taysom Hill on the Saints, he's like right. a incredible athlete, can do so many different things, offers a different dimension than Breeze, although I think they're better off with Breeze. But I think if a team was, got over their fear of marketing whatever and all that kind of, it's just like Kaepernick's an incredible athlete that I feel like deserves a chance to be playing.
Yeah, it's tough. So my thought was, because what I saw with Cap was he got to a certain kind of a peak, but then what it seemed like started happening is teams started to get used to what his skill set was. Yeah, and so their schemes planned around what he was going to do. And so then he became less effective. And maybe he had some good stats, but he still was not nearly as effective as he was before. And I think what you see with Alex is everybody already knows what Alex is going to be doing, because he had been a starter for so long. You know what it's going to be. And so then therefore they already had strategies planned around him. So you were talking about Taysom Hill. So the quarterback that came from where the GOAT is playing now, Tom Brady. What's the guy's name? I'm forgetting his name right now. The quarterback that started for the Bucs last year.
Winston?
Right. So Winston is playing for the I can't think of anything right now.
Saints. Yeah.
For the Saints. Thank you. And it seems like a strange decision to put a guy that had so few even pass attempts, put him in as, the starter over someone like Winston, who was a starter for all those years.
I mean, it's funny how a lot of this stuff coincides with games against the 49ers, because the 49ers played the Saints 3 weeks ago. In fact, our defensive lineman, Kentavious Street, was the guy that, sent Breeze to the hospital. And during that game, Jameis Winston came in for Breeze. They were still using Taysom Hill as kind of a gadget player. And it was pretty rough. He was pretty skittish in the pocket. And if you look at the last year that he was the starter in Tampa, he's 30 touchdowns, 30 picks, that sort of a thing. Like, you're taking a real risk if you throw someone out there that, without Breeze, you got a small margin of error, and 2-3 picks, that's gonna give the game away. I think what Sean Payton sees in Taysom Hill is he sees someone that he has to design the plays way differently for sure. He has to treat him like Kaepernick. He has to kind of like change a little bit of the playbook to suit his skill set in different ways. But Taysom Hill's a decent quarterback too. I feel like he's just a little bit more, protects the ball a little bit better than Winston does. I mean, Winston is still like, he can sling it. It's just you're going to have to deal with a lot of interceptions. They just come as part of that deal. And but yeah, I mean, it is weird that to see Taysom Hill as their starting quarterback, especially when they're like 10-3 now, or 9-3, 10-3. They just lost to the Eagles, so that game there's a lot that just got exposed in this very regard. But who knows if Breeze comes back? I think that team is going pretty far into the playoffs. But
oh yeah, no doubt, no doubt. So, people, they, it seems like a favorite thing for people to ask me, cause I'm a pretty big guy. I'm, 6'2", 275. And people see me, and the first thing that they say is, "Oh, where'd you play ball at?" I say, "Well, what kind of ball? What are you talking about?"
I never get asked that. So,
where'd you play ball at? No, I did the musician thing. I didn't do well. I did track when I was in high school, junior and senior year, and I didn't do any running. I mean, I ran to warm up because the coach told us to, but I actually did like the field events. So I threw shot put, but as a senior in high school, I was under 200 pounds. We had this guy on the team, and this is kind of heartbreaking because I saw him years later, and he's got MS. And he's in a wheelchair, and he's quivering and stuff. And that really kind of did a number, because when he was in high school, he was blue chip athlete. He's defensive tackle. And he could play anywhere he wanted to. I mean, he was being recruited hard by all of the big programs. And this dude was some sort of specimen, man. And I remember my best throw was like, shot put throw was like 10 feet, it was like 10 feet less than his, but that it's interesting, I talk to my students often about, fitness and the role of fitness and just physical activity, and how that's important, as a musician. Now, I'm a horn player primarily, but I play other instruments also. And obviously, if you're moving air through the instrument, then having good lung capacity and diaphragmatic strength and all of that stuff is positive. But even for playing other instruments, there's a physical aspect of playing those instruments. Piano is very physical, and stuff like having good posture and having enough strength to be able to relax, because it seems to me that sometimes people can't relax because they just don't physically have enough strength to be able to do the thing for any, they don't have enough endurance. Mm-hmm. They can play a certain way for a while, but then their endurance runs out, and then they start a bunch of bad habits start to emerge. Is this something that you think about very much?
Well, yeah, it's what a cool question and great question. I think throughout the years, it's been something that I've gone through a lot of periods of time where I was able to be a lot more focused on that and stuff. I'd like to kind of return to a lot of that. To be honest, like I kind of a lot of life things have taken over that essentially all resorts and excuses in different ways. But it's something that that I plan on. I mean, it used to be like we would on different tours and stuff too. We'd show up and be, find some court and play basketball, you know, there was a time with Eric Harlan Voyager Band and stuff where we keep referring to when we were in Athens, and we played this game of basketball that was like from 3 a.m. to 8 a.m. And we found this court that it was just some of these epic like road basketball games and all that kind of stuff. I've played a lot of basketball throughout time, played in high school, middle school, all that. And you know, really that's just been something I've had fun with for my whole life. But I've done less of it in the last couple of years. But as far as you know, it's one of those things where I think there's kind of, from my perspective, if I'm performing, I like to, and this year, there's never been a better example of this than this year, that I've always had the mentality that I try to go and no matter what the situation is, I do try to play on each concert. I try to play as if it's my last opportunity to play, because you never know if it's going to be, you know, so and for within that line of thinking, I prefer to play with other people that go out and die for it a little bit too. Like that's my greatest joy in life, is going out and sweating through a shirt with a bunch of other people who are doing the same thing. And we're, you know, trying to leave whatever we can there and exhaust ourselves in the process, but it's a fun exhaustion, you know? And, and, you know, beyond just certain things that are like things that I think people can, you know, if your arms are getting tired, you're probably in certain parts of your arm are getting tired. That can be things you can tweak with technique, like just addressing the instrument in a slightly different way can, you know, utilize where your energy is coming from and all that. But as far as just the overall exhaustion of things, it's funny because, I mean, the last handful of years, it was just, I was gone all the time. And me and, you know, all the other people that I play with too, they're in the same boat. Everyone, we lived at, you know, the airport and we lived to just bitch about flight stuff and, you know, just different things like that it was just a daily routine. And now when that was taken away from us, and, you know, since February, I did a 20-day tour in 19 different countries and cities in Europe with Kendrick Scott Oracle. And it was a grueling one. Like every single night we were in a different place, and it was just Groundhog Day of just getting, you know, either going to the airport or, you know, getting in the van, going to the next spot. And a lot of tours are like that. That one was particularly packed. And I'm like, wow, I'm like, man, maybe 2020 is just going to be like this. And then I get home, and a couple days later, I went to go do a duo show with Lisa Fischer. And that was supposed to be a big part of this year too. These duo shows that with the great vocalist Lisa Fischer, we've been doing. And then right after that, the world went into lockdown mode. And since then, other than, you know, doing some home concert things in a limited capacity, I've also been dealing with, my mother has dementia and also now cancer. So we're trying to, it's been a whole process of kind of dealing with a lot of stuff related to that. So
sorry to hear that, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's life. I'm trying to, you know, just kind of turn towards it and, you know, dive into whatever I got to write out this chapter and all of that. And but at the same time, you know, the actual physical gigs that I've done within the last 10 months were like 2 or 3, you know, where going to Smalls with Mike Moreno's quartet, and we were just doing a streaming show, you know, or I did one the other day at the Jazz Gallery with a great vocalist, Sasha Vazandani, with Kendrick Scott, Dana Stevens, Ben Williams. And that gig definitely reminded me, I'm like, damn, you know, just a 2-set gig at the gallery, which would have been just like, you know, something we would do there'd be like on a Wednesday or whatever. It's like, you know, more of kind of a routine thing. I was like, I am beat. I am exhausted. I had forgotten how much you exert yourself in the moment when, you know, you're performing. I mean, it's part of what makes it easier is you can ride the adrenaline when the audience is there. The audience gives you a little bit of that momentum and adrenaline that puts you in a trance and just kind of gets you through the moment and gets you through this, you know, extreme energy exertion that you're going through in those moments. And with no audience, and then also like not having done it in a while, I was like, wow, I need to go sleep for 12 hours after this. This is like, but I went from such a totally different life to that. And it just reminded me that, like, your body gets used to it. Your body gets used to, on these long tours, like not sleeping, or getting an hour of sleep, and then you fly in and then you're like, oh great, the rooms aren't ready. And so you take a nap in the lobby and then you go to sound check. And somehow in that weird little time where you're, in 1/24 of the time when you're doing what you supposedly are being paid to do, or what you do for a living, then you can kind of muster up that trance of like, wow, this is awesome. We're on stage. Like, there's a crowd that's yelling and we can feel all this. And wow, I would die for all these people up here. Like, like you get that trance again, and then it's back to the same stupid stuff of like, hang afterwards, go back to the room, don't sleep much, whatever, get up early, go to the airport, all that kind of stuff, but then with that, like, I felt like I had so much more energy that way. And now it's like, I'm getting sleep, but that gig at the gallery the other day was super exhausting. I mean, it was fun, but it was surprisingly exhausting. I wasn't used to that again.
So when Ben Williams was working on his undergraduate degree at Michigan State, studying with Rodney Whitaker, he actually played in my band.
Oh, cool.
And it's when I was also living in Lansing area. I interviewed Ben on this program. I also interviewed Benny Green.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, which was a great interview. He's very, very generous and knows a ton, and obviously with the folks he played with and everything. Conversation about Oscar Peterson and about Ray Brown and all of that. It was just a really, really very, very cool. I played with Benny when he came to Columbus to play with the Columbus Jazz Orchestra. I frequently played in that band, and although I've not done nearly as much touring as you have, I frequently tour with the Count Basie Orchestra, and I've done a couple tours that were really packed. I get that, but the longest tour that I've done with them was like 2 weeks. But in that 2 weeks, we had like 12 dates or something. It's just like really, really packed. And
you start feeling it for sure. That's why I've always, a big part of my life has just been, I only want to travel with people that I like as people, because like you're gonna know what someone's breath and farts smell like at 4 a.m., 2 a.m., 24 hours a day. You know all five senses what all these other people are like. So you got to be able to get along with them and stuff. And so I've been fortunate though, because the groups that I've played in and traveled a lot in, like, get along like big dysfunctional families. That everyone's different personality quirks just serve to be kind of to create characters in a big sitcom that you're in. And while people inevitably get on people's nerves in different ways, there are things that if you're with the right people that you can always just laugh at, and it kind of cultivates just kind of a general mentality of celebrating each other's differences and quirks and all of that kind of stuff. And and I mean, it's like being back in school and going on field trips and stuff with your close friends and all of that. I think life is, there's an abundance of examples that life is pretty short, and so might as well be around good people and try to be kind to the people around you and be a part of touring is a real social thing. So is comping, and I feel like especially I think it's pretty obvious that like when a group is touring all the time or in the middle of a long tour, you're like, damn, this is as good as these songs have sounded, like where you get that feeling of like, okay, now we're really carving out this repertoire together as a group.
Oh, yeah.
But a part of it is that social communication, and so just knowing how to read each other's minds a little bit better, knowing people's jokes or pace of a conversation and how to fit in socially and stuff, that then directly mirrors itself musically, you know, I think so. But there's been a lot of, I really treasure all those moments, because I'm like, man, now without with there being a long gap, at least with, you know, being able to do this and travel with those groups. I mean, it's also weird for all of us that would just do this all the time. Like someone like, you know, people that you're used to, like, okay, if there's no tour with that band, then maybe there is in 3 weeks or something. And like, you're like, well, I'm just going to see them in 3 weeks when we get on that thing. And, you know, now if you want to see someone, you have to like go through this effort of like, do you want to, like a few months ago, Chris Bodie called me to just hang out. And it was one of those things where I played in his band for about 4 or 5 years or so. I used to split the piano chair there with great pianist Jeff Keezer, who's another one of my influences and heroes. But but I could tell how foreign it was for Chris to just be like, do you want to hang out? Like, it's just like one of these weird, like, you're so used to like, yeah, I know, I'll see you in Albuquerque or wherever the hell we're going. And, you know, but then to make an effort to actually hang out with human beings, it's like, that's a pretty foreign thing for a lot of traveling musicians.
Here, so you got to tell me about this.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Oh man. See, I told you, I don't mess around. That was a symphonic concert. That was with the Peninsula Symphony. That was several years ago, and that's a symphony I love. Every couple of years, I've done a show with them where their conductor Mitchell Klein, they kind of let me design the show, and I write a lot of my own music to give to them, and usually do kind of a combination of repertoire of my pieces for orchestra and other stuff and all that. And on that particular show, it was on the year of the Super Bowl being at Levi's Stadium. And so to commemorate that, because also it was like the first year the Niners sucked after that nice little championship run. So I was thinking in my mind, well, they'll be in the Super Bowl like the week later or whatever. But that was a piece I wrote called "The Catch," which was a tribute to Dwight Clark that moment. So I wrote this piece, and it's technically you're supposed to perform it in a 49ers helmet. So it's in the it's actually in the score of the piece. I wrote in, pianist is to be wearing 49ers helmet, and the conductor was nice enough to wear a 49ers helmet as well, that he got from offensive lineman Harris Barton, who guest conducted that symphony several years before then. But yeah, that's my tribute to the 49ers piece. And I was actually trying to I have the pleasure of knowing Ronnie Lott fairly well. He's someone I consider a friend. I've had the opportunity to hang out with him a handful of times, and he so I asked him if he would conduct that piece and stuff, but he couldn't make it and everything. But he tweeted that picture and said that he was there in spirit. But he, you know, like yeah, that, I mean, I love that team dearly. I mean, I think I've hopefully made that abundantly obvious, but it's definitely
it's pretty obvious.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny too, because I got audited that year with taxes and stuff, and I had to justify the purchase of a 49ers helmet and stuff, and I'm like, it's technically a stage prop, so you know, it's a write-off, you know.
And let's see here. Hold up. Let's see if I can. Okay, wait a minute here. Don't mean to do that. Okay. It's trying to get me to comment. Okay. All right. Here we go. How about that?
Oh, yeah. Well, that was something that we did recently. Alina Engabarian is a really, really great vocalist and pianist and composer, and she's really fantastic. And I played on her record, that Snarky Puppies label, Ground Up. She's a part of that community. Mike League produced her record and had me play on it along with Kendrick Scott and Chris Potter, and a number of other people. And for this particular thing, this was something that we did on NPR's Tiny Desk, where they were doing a spotlight on ground up artists. Becca Stevens did one with Jorge Roeder and Brad Meldau, which was super cool. And there was a big combination of different people, and so we did one of Alina's tunes, and that was fun. I was telling you before we started a little bit that was my first experience dealing with a green screen. I tried to make it look like I was in the studio there, but then all of the people at that studio, that studio is GSI Studios, which is also the label that my new album is going to be coming out on GSI Records. But the GSI people hit me up because they were like, "How did you get into the studio?" Like, and I was like, "Well, technically, I wasn't there. I was in my living room." But you know, those kind of things are fun. I've kind of been somewhat adverse to. I mean, it took me a while into the quarantine. Like, I feel like everyone had to all of a sudden go to audiovisual college, you know, like we were all students again of just like, how in the world do you film something at home? How do you mic a piano? How do you tune a piano by yourself? All of these different things. And so I was new to, you know, learning about all of that kind of stuff. I feel like over the span of the last 10 months, myself and any other, you know, my friend musicians, we've learned more from these like 12-year-old YouTubers making tutorial videos about different things than anything else. It's like those are our new professors, or the kids that have figured it out before us and all that. But you know, I kind of, right when everyone was trying to do the people in squares thing and stuff, like I kind of couldn't get myself to do it, because you take someone like Jacob Collier, and Jacob is he is the master of that art form. Like he's just you know, being able to like edit all of the visuals of the different instruments and things in squares and all that kind of stuff. And it used to be you could just enjoy Jacob and be like, well, yeah, I don't have to do that, so this is great. But now everyone kind of has to be a version of that, you know, to do these like people in squares videos, and so that was one of the only ones in that particular kind of a genre that I've really ever done. But it was kind of fun. It's fun to see it all come together.
Yeah, but buddy of mine, I also interviewed him on the show, named Chris Johnson. He's a great writer. He's a great trumpet player. Played in the Basie band for years. He was the director of jazz studies at University of Utah. Also worked at Ohio State prior to that. And he has on his it's called Office Hours with Chris. That's his Instagram. But he's got this system worked out where it's a tutorial. It shows people step by step exactly what to do, down to the thing where you're clapping to sync up the video, and if you have to do multiple takes and all of that. And he's also, like I said, he's a great writer, and he's done a bunch of these videos, and I've been able to collaborate with him on that stuff. And so that's been cool. But I certainly would not want to be the person editing the video.
I've done a lot of video editing over time, and it's something that I have mainly used just for comedy purposes amongst friends and stuff. And it's just, it takes so long. I mean, it's so satisfying once you can actually get through it and everything, but it's one of those things that, like, you know, that it'll be a whole day or two on just one small little thing.
Because if you think about it, like, you know, it's one thing like on like a linear, you know, something that's linear where it's like one video, right? But it's a completely other thing when, in order to get the 5 minutes that you need, essentially you're doing like 50 minutes of video.
Yeah.
You know, because you're,
it's hard enough to just weed through different things and find where certain things are in some other video file, let it import. And, you know, by the time you're done editing as far as editing musical video things, by the time you're done editing it, you're definitely sick of the tune. That's for sure. Like it's you got to hear it so many times, you know, but.
Yep. So you're obviously into, in particular, into football. Do you have any other hobbies? I mean, you mentioned something about video editing, so maybe that's
Yeah.
one.
There's most of the videos throughout time that I've edited are just inappropriate stuff that I share with my friends and all of that, but that are all really really funny. If you ask any people that know me and friends of mine, they'll I'm sure they've seen some of my work, but it's definitely not stuff that it's hard to balance that with now. You talk about like in the beginning, like some of the just the image of someone or different things that people have as a perception of them or things that set them apart, and it's hard to you know be a band leader and do kind of things that are like, hey, you take someone like Becca Stevens. She's one of my best friends, and she's a genius. She's brilliant, and musically, she's like, but she'll have this. She'll make these things that are you know less about the comedy, less about comedy and stuff, and more about like a great artistic statement and stuff. But then at the end of the day, like she's one of the funniest people that I've ever known, and so it's hard to balance like a comedy side of things with other things. And all of that, but yeah, I mean, as far as things that I do for fun, a lot of things have to do with sports. There's been a lot of in this last year, there's been a lot of just taking care of certain life things that I've had to deal with regarding my mother and kind of family things and all of those things, that there hasn't been as much time for just straight up hobby things. But usually over my life, that's been sports or art in different ways. Yeah, video editing sometimes, but hopefully things that I can start sharing with people. The title of my new album is called Tree Falls, which is kind of a reflection on the fact that I've made a lot and done a lot of stuff over the last like 10, 11 years. But as far as sharing it with people, that's been kind of the thing that we live in a culture where it's kind of oversharing. Everyone knows what someone had for breakfast and lunch and dinner, and I've been pretty bad at keeping up with that pace and caring about that and that sort of a thing. But I've also, like, some of my most personal music and music that I'm the most proud of is stuff that I did create over the last 10 years, and stuff that has to do with my family, things that I did the lyrics to, things that it was. This new album is my proudest work as a musician. Like, it's definitely like my it's something that where I really feel like myself musically. Kind of finally, it's definitely, I haven't had the opportunity to make a record like this, and it's a pretty cool thing. But it all comes from that phrase: if a tree falls in a forest, does it make a sound? And so this album is kind of my way of attempting to answer that by sharing a lot of music that's the most personal to me. And so most of the music on this record, except for one or two tunes, is all my original music, and stuff that it has Eric Harlan, Gretchen Parlato, Becca Stevens, Casey Abrams, Ben Wendell, Charles Altura, DJ Ginyard, a string section, woodwind section. Like, it's got a lot of different stuff that I was fortunate to be able to. I recorded all this quite a bit of time before the world went into lockdown. So all of this stuff was a lot of people in the same room, which I was really lucky that we were able to do that before the world.
Isn't that such a strange rewiring?
Mm-hmm.
I have a 7-year-old, and one of the things that is like cringe-worthy to me is just hearing him comment on, well, such and such didn't have a mask on, and
right,
and hey, how can they be playing football right now? How come they don't have a mask on? And this kind of stuff. That just makes me, it's more than annoyed. I'm more than annoyed by that. I'm not annoyed at him, of course. I
No, but
am
it's something none of us had to deal with when we were that age at all.
right. Exactly. This is not what a 7-year-old is supposed to be dealing with. He's
Yeah.
not, that's not the way he's supposed to be experiencing the world. He just started going to, first grade. And like, now at least, I mean, we've got him in a private school. And so at least he's able to actually go to school, and they're doing all this stuff and, following all their protocols. And there's only been actually a couple days where they had to say, okay, well, for next week, we're doing 2 days, remotely because such and such a teacher just, tested positive and, blah, blah, blah. But there's been basically no issues,
Yeah.
and so it's been safe and stuff, but he's got to wear a mask to school all the time. And and he's got to have like 3 masks with him. They get somewhat of a break from having to wear the mask, but it's just like, come on, man, that's not what this is supposed to be.
Well, at least he'll have some stories to tell his grandkids that like, well, when I was your age, we had to wear masks and walk 50 miles to school and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's something else. The one thing that I can think of, that just because I kind of started to get, over the course of this last year, I mean, the other thing is like everyone's sharing stuff left and right or going live and doing all this. And I'm like, damn, I've recorded this whole album. I'm like waiting for this thing to be released. So
yeah,
it's like, I'm like, let me just release this damn thing. But as far as music that I'm creating over this last year, I've had, in a lot of respects, like kind of a writer's block in a way, just because it's like when we're all going through the same thing and we get told on every single commercial, we have like, it says like, hey, we're all in this together from your friends at Pringles. And like, we have all that kind of stuff that's like, like, give me a break, like we're also sick of this stuff. And I've found that it's actually harder to write music in that sense. And a lot of people would massively disagree with me on this, but this is just coming from my own writer's block, where if we're all going through the same thing, it's just a little bit hard to, also it's like, music nowadays, it's like a lot of it is solo and a lot of it's like acoustic at home, like it's a different feel to it. And so I got curious actually, because I started to think, well, what the hell were they writing in 1918? What were they writing in 1919? Because they were going through this, they were all wearing masks, they were social distancing, they couldn't play with other musicians, they were like, there definitely was no Zoom, there was none of that. And I found some really interesting stuff that that people were writing around that time by different composers like Frederick Mompeau and Stravinsky and Rebecca Clark, who is a great underrated composer. That she back then she had to, like, I think she a lot of times would to get her music performed. Sometimes she would have to like go under a male name or something, because they were just, there was a lot of issues back then. But nonetheless, it was just interesting to look at some of the music that people wrote during that time and performed during that time. Because I was curious, because like I'm like, well, I know it's not going to be like the People in Squares music, and I know it's not going to be, but them having gone through the same thing, I'm trying to like see if I can find some answers by looking at some of that. Because also, if you look at it this way, like every single type of music, every single genre of music that we really know outside of classical music came after the last pandemic. Like rock music, R&B, jazz, like reggae. Well, no, I mean, I don't know. Reggae's been a lot. I'm just naming genres, but like everything came after that. And it's like, if that's possible, then a lot of good is possible after this sucker. Like this is just, we got to get through it. It's a massive pain in the ass, but maybe on the other side of this, there's some great music and like a whole bunch of, I mean, I can't even grasp the idea of like what are 9 or 10 new genres like, like I can think of maybe little branches of what we already have, but like, I really think that there's a lot of music and art and creation on the other side of this, that the whole this idea of writer's block during the pandemic,
it's so what's interesting is my in my writing and composing, my arranging even is always influenced by people. You know, it's like the relationships that I have, and often it is specific to the particular musicians that I'm working with and that I
Yep.
work with, right? So like I write different for people based on what I have an idea of what they can do.
Yeah.
So I want to like, oh, this cat, he's really into this metric modulation thing. He's into that. Oh, he would be
Right.
killing on this thing. Let me get that, And so without the frequent opportunities to play with those musicians, there's just less sort of inspiration to go around.
I hear that 100%. I mean, that's the majority of the way that I think. I think about the people that I'm going to be giving this music to play. I think about that, and I'll get in my head sometimes the venue. I'll get an image of what that theater is like or something. Like there's one show that I do every year is that I've been teaching at Stanford Jazz Workshop for this would have been my 24th year in a row being a part of that, but every year I do like my own show there, and it's kind of like my home game every year that I get to come back and do. And I always try to write some new arrangements or write some new music specific to that situation. And I always have like the image of that theater that's there at Stanford in my head when I'm writing the music or doing arrangements for that show, plus the musicians that I know are going to be on that show. And so just those aspects being taken away, then it's like it's either going to be something that I play solo or kind of build up, or I guess I could send it to people, but then it's like, it just doesn't give you that same, you don't get juiced up about that whole idea of like writing in that way. And for me, it's like more than half of this stuff at least is just thrown out the window, because it's like I'm not writing for anyone. I'm writing for like myself or something, or I could send it to people to add on to, but that's not what I want. I want the interaction. I want to create like vehicles that me and these particular friends are going to play around with, like together, and so that's been the biggest contributing factor to kind of like that writing block stuff and all that. But hopefully it'll come back, pretty strong on that aspect of things. Even if we're not doing tours of, 20 cities in 20 days, even if that takes a real long time to come back, I still think being able to play with other people in person and try out new music with them and try out new arrangements and write for them, that's gonna be a huge thing when that comes back.
Now, speaking on relationships, I heard you mention your girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm going to admit something. In my life, well, so first of all, it takes a special person to understand why you want to practice 5 hours a day for a gig that pays $50. Okay. So it takes a special person that would understand that. Obviously, this is hyperbolic. I mean, because whatever it is that you do,
that gig pays $50. I'm not practicing for 5 hours, but I'm just saying, but I'll go with the
right. But there's this whole starving artist thing, and it's, cats wear that as like a kind of a badge of honor. If I'm really not getting paid hardly anything for my money, then see, I'm struggling and suffering for my art more than you are. So, so it makes me better, so, there's that whole kind of smugness kind of thing. But I was saying that to say that, choosing the right person or the right kind of person, I think has always been challenging,
Hmm.
but I think these days maybe is the most challenging that it's ever been. And that's not even considering the sort of strange kind of lifestyle that musicians tend to have.
Right.
Um,
I mean, I'm lucky to be kind of uh I I'm like grandfathered into this relationship in the sense of I think if my girlfriend like met me right now in December of 2020 all of a sudden, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm a jazz pianist, and I'm like, should probably run for the hills. But she's known me throughout a long period of time. My girlfriend, and her name is Gretchen, not to be confused with Gretchen Parlato, who I have toured with for years, and I was always. It's just always a confusing thing for most people when I say Gretchen, because I know two prominent Gretchens in my life. But my Gretchen, she works in sports. She works for the Major League Baseball Players Association, which is really cool, and a lot of baseball perks and things like that in this relationship, and it's fun. It balances things out, but she's actually known me. We dated for the first time when we were like 12 or 13, and so we just took like a 18-year break and a lot of things happened. I got married and divorced and all sorts of stuff. But then when you meet back up later on in life after that many years, and neither one of you are crazy yet, then you can kind of trust it. And so we've actually known each other for a really long time. And she knew back then when we were 12, 13, I was doing the same thing. I was a pianist. I was performing and I was doing all of those kind of stuff. And she's known me for the majority of these past 6 years as someone who is always on the road or kind of like, performing all the time. And she's incredibly supportive and I'm really lucky to be with her. And, but she also knows that, I've put so much time and effort and my heart into, that I couldn't do anything else, and I wouldn't do anything else. And
yeah.
it does take a special kind of person to acknowledge that. But I think that's because she really knows me, and also the balance of like, there's no competitiveness. We're not both musicians and things like that. And
Right.
But I got to say, at the beginning of the quarantine, it was like she went out to San Diego to for a conference that she was having in the baseball world. And I was supposed to go out there to perform with Lisa Fischer in LA. And then her conference got canceled. And she was like, should I fly back home or should I go to my family's house out here and all that? And I was like, oh, just stay out there. Like, this whole thing will blow over in a couple weeks. And so 5.5 months later, she finally was able to get a flight back to New York and came home, and it sucked. It was really lonely just being, not only I was a fish out of water just being home all the time, but I, her not being around, I was like, the seamless delivery person would come and I'm like, here, come inside. Do you want a drink? Like, let me, like, do you want to hang out? Like, I was just like shocked to see human beings. But when she finally came home, then it was a lot nicer, because now we've kind of learned how to navigate this stuff together and stuff. But it does really take a special person and a special relationship. I feel really fortunate that I'm not like having to search for that right now and everything, that we've been able to support each other a lot, like throughout all this this stuff. And she knows that it's really it really sucks for me on a daily basis, because I just like I just would give anything to be complaining about a flight or something, and getting back to my normal days of being a diva of like, like a lot of us, my closest friends, like we just spend every single day getting on these flights and all this. So we turn into like travel nerds and airline nerds and things, that we're really obsessed with like the little small details of everything. And when a lot of different tours where we're, constantly refreshing our phones on the way to the airport to see who got the upgrade over the other one. And things like that, I just like, I want to get back to those simple things that we all really, really took for granted. And you know, I'm just so sick of like, hey, everything's about the with no disrespect to this conversation, which is super fun, but I'm so sick of just everything's got to happen online and all that kind of stuff now. And
Yeah.
and
Yeah, I mean, technology is a beautiful thing. It can facilitate stuff like this,
Yeah.
which is great. But you know, it's not a replacement for interaction with real people.
yeah.
And
Hopefully
in
there's some sort of positive hybrid that where we can take from this era and like take it into the next. Like I would still, even if we're traveling around doing the same kind of stuff that we were before, I'd still sit down and do something like this because I feel
Right.
like, you know, this gave us another avenue or dimension to explore as humanity and stuff that clearly everyone has had to learn a bunch of new skills. Everyone has had to learn things that they never wanted to learn, and people who have never cooked are learning how to cook, and people who don't know the first thing about, you know, miking their instrument have to learn about miking their own instrument, you know, things, all sorts of stuff that it's like it rips the Band-Aid off and those things. But I'm definitely not one of those people that's like, I think this whole thing is a good thing, because it's not. This shit sucks.
Yeah. I can't stand that. You know, so, you know, part of what I do, you know, my main gig, of course, is Ohio State. I'm the director of jazz studies there, but I'm also the minister of music at a church. And fortunately, the church that I work at, it's a small church, and we've been doing live streaming from the church. So we've been doing services the regular time. So that hasn't stopped. There's just no congregation. So, you know, so we have a limited number of folks so that we can do that. And so that's been a great, you know, a wonderful outlet. And honestly, I don't know where my headspace would be without that, just having that interaction with other musicians, great musicians. And, you know, it's a good, you know, it's a good situation. But I was saying that to say that there's a lot of folks in the church community, especially a lot of these sort of mega churches, that are trying to spin this as if it's some sort of positive thing. You know, oh yeah, this is better. This is better than what it would have been, because frankly, a lot of churches, they've still been able to balance their, balance their budget. And the church that I work at, we've been able to, it's actually been a net zero, which is like freaking amazing.
Yeah.
That it would be that way. But some of these big churches are really hurting and they're struggling. But then there's, some of them that are like, hey, actually we're doing better than we were before. Hey, maybe this is like the silver lining. This is the positive thing that, came out of this. And this is actually better because X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, I'm sorry, it's not better.
Right.
It's worse. It's way worse.
That's the thing. I mean, I'm fortunate to, my mother has, it's like a health disaster, but she didn't get the virus and all that kind of stuff. I know people who have and have been in comas, and I mean, people are dying, so it's like at the end of the day, anytime people, we can look at things that we've learned over this course of time, I think, or ways that we've added a different element to our lives and stuff. But, this is definitely going to, when we look back on this in 50 years, it's going to be something that also will be viewed as like a massive tragedy. There's like, we've lost a lot of people, especially in the music world too, just all of these,
oh man,
legends of just, and it's like you eulogize someone on Facebook and then the next day it's like another legend passes away. It's just been absolutely outrageous this year. I mean, it's always outrageous. Every single year it does seem over the top, but just this year, especially with COVID and everything happened, it's just been like, who do we have left? Like, it's just really been sad, and I think this is a year that at the end of the day, like, sure, we made it out with some new skills or learned some different things, or in the case of some people, they've managed to somehow make more money or something or all of that. But at the end of the day, like, if we can get to the end of this, then we survived something together. And then everything is going to be informed by that from that point on and everything. But it's just, yeah, it's so hard to look at it as a good thing.
I mean, look, definitely we can take things that we learned and, don't stop doing them.
Yeah.
Frankly, this interview series, it was something that I wanted to do. The podcasting thing is something that I had wanted to do for a long time, but I just never really had the time to do it because I have 1,000 things plate spinning. You know what it is to be a musician. You have to have a professional musician. You have to have all these plates spinning and you have to be making sure everything's going. And it's like, can I really add another plate? I don't know if I can.
Right.
When am I? Okay, there it is. Oh,
yeah.
It's that whole thing. And so this actually opened up.
Like someone just threw a plate at you. You're getting a couple more plates. Now you got to deal with these. Like, it's definitely, I mean, it's one of those things that makes me believe in, I'm officially like agnostic. Like I believe in the religion of I'm probably wrong. So whatever it is, I probably don't know. And I personally believe like, I'm kind of open to anything in the sense of like maybe there's parallel realities that a multiverse or things where people, because I know in some reality
the parallel Earth 2 with no COVID.
Yeah, right. Maybe on some timeline, we kept doing what we were doing or whatever. And in this timeline, now I know how Zoom works and I can mic my own piano and I can like things like that. But I'm like, why couldn't I have jumped to being the assistant offensive coordinator for the 49ers timeline? Like that's the one.
That's Earth 3. That's Earth 3.
One of these other, yeah.
That's Earth 3.
Damn it. I picked the wrong one, Yeah, I think about that all the time though. I'm like, man, this is just so unexpected. Like there was my girlfriend and I kind of continually reference this one SNL skit that they're pretty hit or miss, but they had a pretty good skit a few weeks ago where they were talking. It was like a psychic in 2019 was talking to people about like things that would happen in 2020, and she's like, I see you with a bag of Doritos saying like you didn't use enough soap on the bag of Doritos, like I don't want to get it from a bag of chips. Like they're trying to figure out what all this means, but we're thinking like some psychic telling me that like, well, in the year 2020 and from February to September you'll do 2 gigs, like things like all of these things to think about, like just in the context of anything in the past. It's so crazy. But
yeah, one thing I've heard, and this is sort of along the lines of that the thing that you're talking about with the writer's block is so I you hear this thing, it's like, hey, and admittedly they're trying to find a way to spin something positively, but they're like, hey, I just know that all these musicians, now that they have time to practice, they're in their lab, they're inventing all this new stuff and they're practicing for all these hours and they're doing all this. When they come out, man, everybody's going to be at another level. And something in the back of my head says, I'm glad that you believe in us that way, but I don't, that's not really how it works.
Nope. Because it's, by not having the time to be practicing 5 hours a day and stuff, that's what kept us sharp, because we had to learn some new music. What I miss more than anything, and it's like life filled this up for me, so I had to, if I was playing with 4 or 5 different groups, like I remember a week where I think last year where I was playing a gig in Harish Raghavan's band, who's a great bassist. He plays in my trio, and I have occasionally played in his group. We play in Eric Harlan's Voyager together, a lot of other bands. But he writes really complex music in the sense of there's just a lot of shifting odd time signatures. So on one page, there'll be like, 17 different time signatures all on that same page, like random bar of 3/16, followed by 11/7, all this kind of, but it's a good workout, especially just for like learning some new music that's kind of challenging, or it takes a bit of time to get used to. and then doing a show with him, doing a show with Lisa Fisher, which like we're playing Rolling Stones and music that she hits that she sang and things like that, you know, and then going from that and then doing a show with Ben Wendell, who has a totally different type of challenging music, and doing a show with Kendrick Scott Oracle all in the same week or a couple of days, where I'm like, damn, these folders of music that I've got, like I continuously was having to get in shape for all of these different gigs in a very different way, like to kind of play very differently in these different situations. And but because of that, it didn't give me the opportunity to, you know, to be practicing for 5 hours or something. It would just be like a focused 1 hour or two, you know, like dealing with certain things at a time. And that kept me sharp, you know. And now with all of this time of just, I mean, I'm also working on just forgiving myself for if there is anything like that gig where I was more exhausted than usual and all of that kind of stuff. I'm forgiving myself for that, like, because I've been throwing all my time into trying to. There's been some very significant things that I've had to do with my mom's situation and all that. So this year has given me the opportunity to deal with that and to find a context where I can be around her quite a bit. And it's, you know, this is like the thing with dementia and all of that is that it doesn't get better. So, you know, I'm enjoying whatever little moments that I can have with my mom. She's pretty far gone. So I'm basically, you know, trying to, we've discovered that certain music though will trigger certain things for her and stuff. And so, but you know, if I was traveling all the time, I wouldn't have been able to be here, be around her, and you know, deal with this situation and stuff. So I'm thankful that there was some sort of opportunity that presented itself that where I could, you know, I had to make a decision and kind of jump on it. And I have it involved getting another place than the one that I was in, and to be able to spend more time with my mom and things like that. But so I've put so much time and energy into that kind of stuff that I'll forgive myself for being a little tired at the Jazz Gallery gig and things like that, you know, and I'm ending the year by, I'm doing a streaming trio show on December 19th at this place called Blue House Live that's just outside of DC. And it's going to be with Eric Harland and Harish Raghavan, who are like my longtime trio, and I love those guys. And so I figured like I can't let the year pass without at least doing something, the three of us. And it's a long way to drive out there, but they have a good streaming setup and all that, and it'll just give us an opportunity to play a gig together, which, you know, it means a lot to, and I'll never take anything for granted again in that regard, you know, to be able to play with them. It's like, man, I haven't gotten a chance to play with the two of them together in such a long time. And also, you know, the other thing I'll say is like, you know, I very much miss the feeling and presence and connection of having a live audience there with you. But it's also weird with masks on. It just, like, so much communication on the bandstand happens from like little eyebrow movements and things like that, you know, like if the beat gets turned around or something, you turn around to just like laugh at something, you know, you just like, looks like you're vibing them out, you know, because you got that mask on, you just see eyes, you know. So sometimes it's hard to tell the expressions and stuff that that part of it. I mean, I'm the way that I like to band lead, I do very little talking things out or verbal communication. It's all like tiny little looks, or I'll start playing an intro. They'll hear it. I'll set up when the tune, you know, where they can sneak in whenever they want, you know, like things, subtle things like that just like, if I do want to cue to something, it might just be like a quick look or a quick little eyebrow. Right. And all that. And, you know, that's the thing where the mask, I mean, I'll keep it on, you know, whatever, but at the same time that there is a slight little way that affects things, I guess. So,
yeah, you know, I'm fortunate to have someone too, and not to be looking for someone during COVID, and partially because that would be an ultimate drag. And personally, I think that the stock is pretty low. I'm sorry. It's just, it just seems like the dating market seems like a crap show. I mean, it's just not, doesn't seem like an appealing thing. I feel really bad for my students. But then on top of that, to not really know what someone looks like because they're wearing a mask, it's like, oh yeah, well, she's got really cute eyes. Okay, the hair is good. Okay, she's in shape. That's good. And then the mask goes off. It's like, oh,
she's got two
it looks
mouths.
like,
Okay. Yeah.
she looks like Scorpion from Mortal Kombat.
I mean,
When she takes
it's a good day for people who have kind of a messed up lower half of their face. So they can get away with a lot. So.
Oh, that's great. Well, on that note,
Great.
man, it's been great talking to you, man. I've admired your playing for a long time. Particularly, I love that Caravan, your arrangement on Caravan.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's one that I've tried to retire it for years, like just because I'm so like, but it's just like it's fun to play, especially if I'm playing it with the right people and stuff. That is still a fun one to I don't know. I got to plan this set for this show that we're gonna do in a few days. I still don't know what we're gonna play, but I'm gonna keep that as a fallback. I think it's it's an easy one to go back to.
Here's one for Dr. Thunder.
Yeah. If I could do it as like a special dedication, then I can maybe get away with doing it again.
All right, man. Well, thanks for coming on the show. It's been really interesting, fun conversation. I'm gonna have to have you back at some point, even if all we do is just talk about football.
For sure.
It seems like
that could fill an hour and a half easily, for sure. So.
Yeah, right. But it was.
And I will say that I'm starting a podcast with Joe Sanders, who's one of my best friends, and he's a great bassist. But we used to be roommates, and we have a very special friendship, and we have argued about sports and all this kind of stuff for our whole life. So it's called our working title. I don't know if this is the official. I think this may end up being. We already have a theme song and everything, but I think it's You're Effing Welcome with Joe and Taylor. So, but stay tuned for that podcast. We're gonna be talking about a lot of sports and music and just kind of general stuff. So, and we definitely dive deep on some very Homer issues of. He's a huge Packers fan. So we have a lot of discussion about that kind of stuff. So yeah,
that sounds very interesting, man. I'm gonna have to check it out.
Cool. Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it, and it was great to talk to you.
Likewise, man. I'll see you.
All right, man. I'll see you later.
All right, now.